Hello, I am Bénédicte de Saint-Laurent of Association pour Sainte-Victoire. I'd like to present you this slideshow about the restoration of Sainte-Victoire mountain 3 decades after a major fire that happened in 1989. Sainte-Victoire is a mountainous range located in the southeast of France, 10 kilometers on the east of Aix-en-Provence. The range is stretching over 25 kilometers and benefits from a wide forest cover on 30,000 hectares. It's a magnificent nature reserve in the immediate vicinity of Aix-en-Provence, not far from Marseille. The perimeter of the Grand Site gathers around 20 communes between Aix, the Durance Valley in the north, the Arc Valley in the south, and with a recent expansion to the Département of Var in the east. On 28 August 1989, after a very dry summer, a huge fire started in the west and ended by burning 5,500 hectares, destroying almost all the existing forests. It's a renowned mountain through the paintings of Cézanne and other artists. The fire triggered a huge emotion in Aix-en-Provence and much beyond. You have here a photo of the mountain the night after the fire and around 30 years later. This historical fire continued to burn during several days because of the extremely high heat. This view represents the southern wall of the mountain a few months after the fire and 25 years later on. Very rapidly after the fire, a lot of people were concerned to try to repair the damages. The associations, the local and national authorities, lots of volunteers, scouts, schools, the army, medias, and private companies. One of them, for instance, funded a remarkable Cézanne exhibition in Aix-en-Provence in 1990. Concerning the civil society, a grouping was created a few days after the fire, the Association pour Sainte-Victoire. It gathered most of the large associations interested in the mountain range, such as the French Alpine Club, CAF, the Association of Hikers, AEP, the Friends of Sainte-Victoire, etc. The ASV rapidly developed an intensive activity around the cut of the burned wood, the construction of weirs, the first plantations, the sensitization of large audience and visitors, as well as some contributions to the reflection on the future of the mountain. As early as March 1990, a white book was written by the associations. It contained most of the measures to be taken in order to protect and rehabilitate the mountain range, as well as rebuilding the forest. The ASV was particularly concerned by plantations. Over 100,000 trees were planted during the first years, with an extremely variable success rate. Around 70% of the most robust species, such as ash, survived, especially in favorable areas, such as valleys on the north part of the mountain. On the contrary, in drier sectors or areas, which were more exposed to sun and wind, most of the trees died. The average success rate measured after 25 years is around 25%. Several types of plantations were tried. Here, the construction of ways using the burned wood in order to avoid erosion, a cedar plantation near Prieuré on the top of the mountain, a more classical plantation on the flat ground near Piloubier, and finally an olive tree plantation realized by Département des Bouches-du-Rhône. Several progress and breakthrough were realized on the institutional side, whereas the associations were requesting a strong structure such as Parc Naturel, a natural park. The authorities first created between communes a syndicate with unique vocation. 10 years later on, it became a mixed syndicate associating the region, Provence, and the Département des Bouches-du-Rhône. In 2004, 15 years after the fire, this syndicate obtained the label Grand Site de France. This type of recognition allowed to hire a consequent team dedicated to Sainte-Victoire. The integration of the team to the metropole Aix-en-Provence-Marseille in 2017 constrained the autonomy of this Grand Site. On the contrary, the perimeter was enlarged up to Durance on the north, Massif de Concorse, and to several communes in the Département du Var, so that the Grand Site now gathers 50,000 hectares or 500 square kilometers, which represent almost a rectangle of 20 per 25 kilometers. The recognition of Sainte-Victoire as a French Grand Site brought some very interesting components, such as a team of nature guards on the ground, some very exemplary actions in order to preserve protected species, and an action towards commune sensitization. On the other side, the protection stays insufficient on the periphery of Grand Site. There are problems with constructions, windmills in the very near proximity of Sainte-Victoire, and over-frequentation, too many visitors. Now, very rapidly, a few slides about the status of the mountain during the fire, or just after the fire, and now, 20 to 30 years later on. Here you have the oppidum of Untinus, which is close to Saint-Antonin-sur-Bayon, in the southern part of the mountain. You can see that the trees almost disappeared after the fire, and now there is a relatively important forest coverage. The valley of Saint-Antonin, you can see a tree which was still burning, and the vegetation now. Here a canyon in the Untinus oppidum, almost no tree in 1989, and 25 years or 26 years later on, a lot of pine trees which were growing. The other side of the oppidum, with a wide canyon which was created by erosion after the fire, and this canyon is partly distracted by the growth of the trees. A view which interests all the hikers and climbers, just under the Deux Aiguilles wall, You can see it was very much burnt in 1989, and now it starts being covered by vegetation. During this process, there were two schools. Should we leave the nature do its work, or should we as human beings try to intervene? Our initial ambition was very Promethean. The first motto of ASV was tomorrow Sainte-Victoire will be the victory of man. I think it was stupid. With some time delay, we are now conscious that nature is much more efficient than we are. It is only useful to accompany nature. Though some plantations are symbolically necessary to accompany the energy of men or volunteers and to feel the pain of humans, and also maybe to create some seed for future plantations. The forest fires are rather ancient and in a way normal phenomenon in the Mediterranean region. On the graph you can see the rate of carbon that can be observed in the ground over years, 12,000 years before Christ to now. It is relatively constant despite some peaks at certain periods. Some people consider that the fire was over-dramatized, and others consider that the climate change will have a much more important impact, unfortunately. This slide is about the extraordinary energy of natural regeneration. As we said before, around 120 and 150,000 plants were planted by men after the fire, most of them in the heart of the massif, of the mountain range. It's neglectable compared to natural regeneration. Just concerning alpine, we can consider that over 150 million were naturally planted and now survive. This shows that human plantations are only 0.1%, and there are other trees, of course, than the alpine. The cooperation between civil society and official institutions was good. We talk about the 4 C's of ASV, to be constructive, creative, cooperative, which creates confiance or trust. We're not there to criticize, but to build. Some commissions were created with Grand Site on climbing, events, hiking, Natura 2000, which is a European program for nature conservation, on the renewal of Grand Site label, and with Département for the nature reserve. Some frequent works were realized with Grand Site, such as trails, getting rid of rocks in dangerous areas, small installations, and finally, some associations are managing spaces or equipment. For instance, the Friends of Sainte-Victoire are in charge of the Prieuré area, which belongs to them. The paragliders work in the specific domain. The hikers are managing the climbers are managing the climbing sites, and AEP, excursionists, the hikers, are working on a markup of trails. 30 years later, nature regained its own rights. The most important scares of the fire have disappeared. The mountain range is better protected against fire through a discontinued forest, a regular maintenance, agro-pastoralism, the plantation of olive trees or vineyards, etc. The biodiversity is remarkable, with the presence of wolf, of chamois, mouflon, the Bonelli eagle, etc. The mobilization is going on in order to safeguard Sainte-Victoire. Thank you very much.